Welcome to Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Ship, and I'm excited to be sharing with you my life with a son on the spectrum. This podcast is for anyone who is looking for quick tips and perspective, but most of all, for hope and inspiration. So sit back, relax, and let's put the pieces together. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Ship. Thank you so much for joining me today. Last week we had the great honor and pleasure of speaking with Lenora Edwards. She is a certified speech-language pathologist with a company called Better Speech. If you didn't get a chance to tune into that episode, please do. She is just a wealth of information, and Better Speech is also just a fantastic organization if you're looking for additional services in the realm of speech therapy. Today, I'm especially excited for our guest on the show, Dr. Nikki Robinett. Dr. Nikki is a dedicated physical therapist with 9 years of experience, specializing specifically in pediatrics. Originally from Minnesota, she's been in Arizona for the past 11 years, and her passion working with children actually stems from years ago when she was babysitting and nannying. She pursued her education at Arizona State University and earning a degree in kinesiology, and later completed her doctorate of physical therapy at Regis University in Denver, Colorado. In her career, Dr. Nikki has treated diverse patients in various settings. She has now founded M&G with a mission to share her expertise quickly and conveniently, with a large focus on mom guilt. She aims to reach families in need, offering mobile and virtual services to avoid disruptions and long wait times. Dr. Nikki's approach includes hands-on classes for families to understand their children's development, strategies for success, and handling techniques as well. Whether it's through private sessions or group classes, Dr. Nikki ensures caregivers can feel confident in implementing interventions and helping their child thrive. Thank you so much, Nikki, for being on the show today.
Yes, of course.
How are you? Good?
Yes, I'm great. Thank you.
I'm super excited because, we've had conversations. I've spoken to Dr. Nikki before, and I really liked the approach that you kind of give. So I want you to be able to explain that to our listeners today. But can you just start sharing a little bit first by your background and, what inspired you to specialize in pediatric physical therapy?
Yes, of course. So I grew up in Minnesota, and I just loved babysitting and nannying all the time. And when I was a child, my dad was always trying to show me different careers, and especially careers that had perks.
Yeah.
And so he would be like, oh, you should be an air traffic controller because then you could get free flights and things like that. And anyways, I really like the medical side of things, and I didn't want to be stuck behind a desk all the time.
Yeah.
But even to this day, I cannot handle gore, and I'll have to cover my eyes in a gory movie scene. And I just didn't really think that being a physician or a nurse would be appropriate based on that limitation. So my dad actually had a skiing accident and had to get surgery and then go to physical therapy. And he suggested that I shadow. And I just loved it, and I thought it was really fun, and you got to move around a lot. Mm-hmm. And then I realized you could do PT for kids. Yeah. And since I already loved to babysit and nanny and be around kids who love to explore and try new things, right, it just made sense to follow that career path.
It was a good match then. Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, can you explain to our listeners, because, in the autism community, occupational therapy is really common, but what's the difference between physical therapy and occupational therapy? Just to kind of lessen confusion for our listeners today.
Yes. So there are a ton of overlaps between occupational and physical therapy.
Okay.
Physical therapy really focuses on the postural side of things, the big gross motor movements. Those examples would be sitting by ourselves, standing, walking, running, jumping, riding a bike, things like that. We both work on the neck and upper body and injuries or pain. The occupational side of things works more on the fine-tuning, the small motor groups, and then also the sensory input and the self-regulation. So kids with autism or adults with autism who struggle with actually sitting and paying attention to things and having the ability to just be regulated, those people would generally have the most success going to OT first, and then PT will work on those bigger body movements to help us be more focused and coordinated and have more endurance to participate.
Okay, that makes great sense, because I know a lot of stuff that we've focused on with Drayson with his occupational therapy has been that fine gross motor skill. But so that's interesting that you bring that up. Do you think that it would be beneficial to have a pairing of both of those types of therapies?
Absolutely, yes. So oftentimes PTs and OTs work together. We can do co-treats, or we can have one before the other or after the other. But generally, yes, any child or adult who has a neurodivergent condition, who has multiple needs in different areas of development, would benefit from different therapies.
Okay, yeah, that's excellent. And we got Drayson working out in a gym. With a trainer that works with kids on the spectrum. And that was something that we noticed right away, was that we'd focused so much on the fine motor skills that when he got into the gym, it was almost like he was very uncoordinated. We didn't realize that was such an issue, because we focused on the writing, the penmanship, like you said, all of the smaller things. So when we started that program with him a few years ago, we noticed that, there's some work to do here as well.
Absolutely.
You know? And so that's taken him some time to develop over time. Now, some of the services you provide, now they are in the home to the client? Okay, so you're able to go, so you're mobile, you travel and go to your clients?
Yes, okay. So I do mobile physical therapy in the home throughout the Scottsdale region and then surrounding areas as well. And then I also do virtual therapy as well. And I'm starting to do more consistent group classes and actually in-clinic PT too. So I'm starting to expand a little bit more.
Okay, so there's options for families out there that if they can't necessarily go to a place, that you would be able to come in or offer a virtual session to them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it require a lot of setup for the parents, if it's a virtual type of scenario?
Generally, when we first meet, we would talk about the parents' concerns, and then I would observe where the child is spending most of their time, and then their postures or their movements that are a little bit more discoordinated. And then I would take that information and say, here's what I think you should set your space up like to encourage better posture.
Okay.
This is how we would encourage more desire to naturally jump and run and ride a bike or a scooter.
Right.
So a lot of it is just the basic education of how we set up our space and how we motivate, rather than you need to buy all this fancy equipment.
Yeah. I'll do virtual classes, but go ahead, buy $500 worth of equipment first, and
Yeah.
then we'll do that. Then we'll get going, right?
Yeah.
So one of the main topics that you and I have discussed, and we talked about it, was mom guilt. And I love that you address this kind of in the realm even of physical therapy, but can you explain kind of, what that is in the realm of physical therapy, and how you address that mom guilt, and why you think it's so prevalent among parents?
Yeah. So mom guilt is really just those feelings of insecurity, feeling like you're just not doing enough. And it's those terrible thoughts that keep you awake at night, and you're sitting there thinking, if only I had done this better, or if only I knew this beforehand. And really, it personalizes everything. And that limits the mom's or the parent's ability to really take ownership and to flip it and say, but now I know that if I do this, then my child can succeed here.
Right.
And so when the parent is limited in their mindset, it really limits what kind of progress the therapist can teach the child, and it limits what the child thinks that they can do too.
Right.
So I first started PT thinking, I love being around kids, and this is so fun. And then I saw this other aspect of, wow, I have so much more power if I can really help empower these parents.
Yes.
So really educating them on there's not just one thing that causes a child to do this.
Right.
There's so many other factors. So we spend a lot of time on educating on these are the factors that are contributing to your child's delays or their diagnosis. And these are the things that we have power and control over.
Right.
So then once I start to teach the parent, you're doing great at this and this and this, and these are the things we have power over.
Yeah.
The mom starts to believe in herself.
Yeah.
And then she starts to show me and text me, look at what they're doing now. Look at what I helped them do.
Yeah.
And once she has that confidence, it's just limitless. So it's
Right.
really fun to help show that mom that, that guilt is there, but let's set it aside and let's show you how we can actually take it and flip it.
Right.
And go from there. And so if I can't do it by myself, I often will refer to a mental health therapist.
Right.
And really have them get into the deep nuances of why that's happening.
Yeah, because I think as parents, we don't realize that when we have kids that we bring in all of our predispositions, our beliefs, everything prior to having kids, we've already built a foundation piece about ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that, and I know I'm 100% have been guilty of that myself, where I realized that, this is a me thing, not because of Drayson, or I'm not, I try to recognize that I'm displacing my feelings sometimes in the reaction of what Drayson's doing. Like all of a sudden I'm going, that's probably because of me, not something that he is directly doing, if that makes sense. So how do you address mom guilt in your practice, and what advice would you have for moms that are struggling?
Yeah, so we really just work on, again, those empowering tactics of here's what you do have control over, here's what you're doing great. And when I do my in-person sessions, I teach the moms how to do hand over hand or hands-on techniques.
Okay.
So that they truly know this is the right way to do this.
Okay.
I'll send video recordings for the virtual program as well, and I'll give them that direct feedback. And so instead of worrying that they're going to do more harm, it's showing them like, look, I'm doing this. This is okay. This is how your child's responding, and these are appropriate ways that the child would respond.
Right, right. Which is great because I think sometimes we don't know what to look for.
Yes, exactly.
And I know I've had moments where I've been so emotional that it's like I can't filter whether or not I'm doing the right thing for him in that moment during the therapy. Does that make sense? Like I've caught myself before, especially when he was younger and I had to sit on a lot of his therapies with him. I would catch myself immediately wanting to, take over or hover or, all of those things because I did feel like I need to protect him, or I felt guilty or shame. I think guilt and shame, and we talked about it even on the last episode with Lenora, guilt and shame are some of the two most overwhelming feelings you can feel at the time that you're enduring going into therapies and things like that. So, and I'm sure one thing that never occurred to me, and as we're talking about it right now, that it never occurred to me that you as a practitioner would see that, because if you're so focused on the child, like I think it's interesting that you can see that perspective from the parents as well. Like, okay, there's a struggle here. How can we help them?
Yeah, and it does take building up that trust with the caregiver too.
Yeah.
So instead of walking in and saying, "I can tell you feel guilty," it's showing them.
How's your shame on a scale of 1 to 10 today?
Exactly. Yeah, it's showing them like, I can tell that you feel hesitant.
Yeah.
I can tell in the way that you're answering these questions, like if I see an infant, how much tummy time are you doing? Well, I know I should be doing more. So if you're going into these appointments as the mom and you hear yourself saying should or could or would or if only, those are
Yeah.
those signs that you're really harboring that guilt. And opening up to your practitioner and your child's therapist is really going to help you just learn how to take it one step at a time.
Yeah.
Instead of stewing in all of that guilt.
Yeah. And that's really interesting you say that, because I've definitely early on, I've said stuff like that. I know I'm supposed to be doing this.
Yeah.
I know I should be doing this, but I haven't. I know I need to work on it, you know. And then you kind of walk out of those sessions sometimes going, okay. And then it's so easy to fall back into that place, you know. Can you share how physical therapy can help with, you know, we've talked before, you and I previously, about attention span and engagement with family or peers, and even just safety during physical activities. You know, can you share how physical therapy can help with those types of things?
Yes. So a lot of times kids who have limited attention spans have it because of what their brain is trying to process and what they're doing with the information. Other times, there's actual physical and physiological components that can also be addressed.
Okay.
So if a child is let's say they're at school, they are reported to be kind of goofing off, or the class clown, or they seem disinterested, like they're often leaning, or they're covering their eyes, things like that. Those children, maybe they're not paying attention because they don't even know how to use their body.
Okay.
They don't know how to hold their head up. They're having a hard time breathing. Maybe they're in pain, things like that. So if we can come in terms of the physical therapy side of things and say, hey, why don't we adjust this desk so that they're at a 90-90-90 position? Hey, let's give them some low back support, because they always complain of low back pain at the end of the day.
Okay.
So if a child is struggling just holding their body up, they certainly can't be focusing on high-level critical thinking or following multi-step commands, because they're like, I just need to figure out where my head should go right now. Or if they're leaning and they need their hand to hold their head up, how are they going to write? How are they going to raise their hand? Things like that.
Yeah. And then it comes off as if they're being complacent or non-compliant.
Right.
You know, that happened with Drayson when he was in, I want to say it was first grade. I remember his teacher was saying, well, he just doesn't want to. And I would notice that he would be leaning. And at the time we were entering writing with his, occupational therapist. But it's funny that you say that, because that would never occur to me.
Absolutely. It's people assuming that children have this ulterior motive.
Yeah. They're out to get us.
Yes.
They're all out to get us. No, I'm just kidding.
And it's really not like that. So scaling it back even further and taking the child's personality out of the equation is something that I think PTs do a really good job at doing and addressing. But then going into the other questions that you asked with the engagement with family and peers. So if we can improve their endurance, if we can improve their coordination, then they can go on the family walks or the family bike rides. Oftentimes what I see in PT is the dads are like, I want to get them ready to play sports. And they're not, they can't even catch a ball. How are they going to play pro baseball, for example? And that's the way that dads typically bond with their kids. And so if a dad can't bond with their child, there's disattachment. The child feels shame. And then the dad is like, well, how am I supposed to play with you? And so PT can really help, okay, why can't they catch the ball? Do they not understand what a ball is? Do they feel threatened every time that a ball is thrown at them? Do they not know where their hands are, so they can't possibly bring them together?
Spatial awareness of,
And so really looking at those components of how do we connect the children to other age-appropriate activities so that they can have improved engagement and participation with friends and peers and family, and not be the kid that's like, I hate PE. I want to sit on the side. when I go to the park, all I want to do is scoop because like I'm terrified I'm going to fall at the park, and they don't know how to catch themselves. They can't put their hands out, or the parents are like, yeah, like I feel so stressed going to the park or going to sports because they always come away bruised, and that's stressful.
Right.
So helping with the body awareness and the endurance and the posture in terms of what PT can do will really help that kid feel more connected.
Yeah, and that's such a great point that you bring up, because that was something that my husband struggled with as well. It was I'm not going to get to play football with my kid. This last year, Drayson got to run track, and my husband was in track and field when he was in high school. And that was a big highlight, I think, for Pat. But even then, it was like getting up ready for that moment. It was like then I felt like I was kind of negating both situations. I didn't want my husband to be disappointed if it didn't go out the way he wanted it to, right? And I wanted my son just to do the best that he could, because I was just excited that he was going to run, in a track meet.
Right.
But it's interesting that you bring that up, because that's one thing that I've always heard my husband say over the years, is that he just wants to try to find a way to connect with him. And you're right, sports is such a big part of it. That's why we were so excited when he started working out in the gym. Because I thought, well, if anything, they can go to the gym together and they can work out, just to find something that they can connect on. Because, and Drayson's older now, so he's entering that stage where he wants to kind of be with his dad more anyway. He doesn't want to be with mom. Like he's preteen, so the love and nurturing phase is over. He doesn't want a hug from his mom. He wants to go hang out and be cool with dad. And so he's kind of entering that next stage. And so looking for ways to try to really connect, it's interesting. So now, do you help parents even when you come, or virtual or in person, on those therapies? Do you help them with some of those coaching points as well on things that they can do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So let's say, dad wants them to be able to throw the ball. And the child's favorite thing to do is play with building blocks, for example. It's, okay, how can we take this skill that dad wants to develop, and how can we apply it so that the child is motivated? So could we stack up our building blocks and create a big structure, and then take a ball and throw it and knock it over, and we get to build it up again? Right. Things like that. So really teaching the parents, this is how we can come together to connect, and it's more functional that way, instead of do this because I told you, do this because I want it. Children work for fun, and they work for praise and motivation. Just like adults work for money, we need to find those currencies for kids and really make it so that they care about it and they're getting something out of it.
And they're getting something out of it, yeah, because the bottom line is, instinctually, we all want something out of it, right? Like at the end of the month, we want that result no matter what it is. So and that's interesting that you bring up such a good point, because one thing that I feel like I've learned over the years is thinking outside the box. Like I've had to come up with some really inventive ways to motivate Drayson to do certain things, or to redirect him. Absolutely. Even down to like shower time, in fact, the other day he was trying to tell me, he wanted 100 more minutes before it was time to get into the shower, because 10 wasn't going to cut it when I offered 10. And then I said, okay, how about 15 or how about 20? And he kept saying 100 more minutes. So we kind of flipped a script on him. And I actually got this from my sister, my great aunt Michelle. She one day was there visiting, and she said to Drayson, okay, how many more minutes would you like, before it's time to get in the shower? And he said 10. And got in the shower, little punk. But it was watching how she was doing that, and then taking that and going, okay, that's a think outside the box idea. I would have never. So now, because before I would just say 20 more minutes, and he'd say okay, and then it stopped working. So it's like,
now what?
Yeah. So I love the analogy that you give with like building blocks and throwing a ball and those types of things, and utilizing the two of them, because I think sometimes we think that they're so separate.
Exactly.
Which there's a lot of creative ability, I would assume, within your profession that you have to kind of be open to.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's fun teaching parents this is how you do that. And that is, again, like you said, like that's not something that we're all just naturally great at. And it takes a lot of modeling and observing, like you said, from a family member. And if you don't have family members, or your family members aren't great with younger kids, how else do you learn?
Yeah.
And so surrounding yourself with other people to be like, oh wait, I could do it here. And then you start surprising yourself at how great you are at taking those concepts and applying them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you've worked with, so a lot of patients on the autism spectrum, and, how has that influenced your approach to physical therapy? I mean, one, it's got to be hugely rewarding, I would say too, because we're talking about the parent aspect too. You get to see them kind of light up as well, and probably have some more fun. Like, I would think the one thing is doing some of these therapies with Drayson is I've realized, I'm actually having fun too, a little bit more fun. But what would you say has influenced your approach to physical therapy within that?
Yeah. So I think what has been really helpful is being around really strong occupational and speech therapists. And again, like you're saying, I was watching someone else do that and applying that to my techniques too. So if a child is autistic and nonverbal, before I was like, well, I don't know. I'm not a speech therapist. What am I supposed to do?
Right.
And so incorporating like, okay, do they respond well to pointing? Do they respond well to using their talker? Do they respond well to two choices, or do they always choose the second choice?
Yeah.
And really, again, instead of only the physical lens, it's taking the other lenses and shining it on that as well. And then for kids who are big, what we would call like a sensory seeker, someone who is just constantly like literally bouncing off the walls and like cannot sit and attend, instead of sitting there and being like, well, this is what we're going to do, it's okay, how can we incorporate your movements?
Yes.
And to make it a little bit more functional, and how can we take what you want to do and make it part of a directive task, or something that, there's something at the end of it, instead of let's do this and then they don't understand time or repetitions.
Right.
It's here's the end result, not a number of minutes, but once this is built, let's do that.
Right.
So incorporating those different strategies from different therapists that I've seen. And then also, like sometimes, like we talked about, the connection to kids who are neurodivergent is hard.
Yes. Yeah.
And, you feel bad because you want to have more connection, but you can't. And so us coming in as the therapist and showing them that their child is accepting of love and they deserve love and praise, and showing like, okay, you want them to be able to ride a bike with you to the park.
Yeah.
Today, they learned how to stand on one foot. That's going to help them get on and off the bike.
Right.
So breaking these tasks down and showing the parents, like, look at how great we are with this scaling to the big skill.
There's progress, yeah.
Because as parents, we come in and we're like, well, like, they're still not doing it, is what I get told a lot. Like, they're still not. And so reframing it and saying, but now they can do this. Now they can follow a command for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Now they can do 3 repetitions before throwing themselves to the floor instead of 0.
Right.
And so you're just kind of showing those parents that there's these little steps that we really need to give credit for and show that it's working.
Show that it's working, yeah. Yeah, I remember when Drayson was little, the one of the goals was just to get him to sit for 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
Because we couldn't get him to sit still, just to sit for 5 minutes.
Yep.
And I remember realizing that was fundamental, because then, okay, now we go to 10, now we go to 15, or whatever the benchmark was. But now he can sit and he's okay, he's fine. And I think, we tend to collectively think that the results should just happen, like the riding of the bike, like the example that you just gave, like, well, he still can't ride a bike. Okay, yeah, but he can stand on one foot now, or, or even the fact that he sat on the bike is sometimes a really big deal. Like that was a big deal for Drayson at first. He got interested in like scooters, and it was like just the fact that he put his foot on the scooter, didn't even move, just held it and put his foot on the scooter. Like that was a big deal. And I think that we forget that it's not going to be an overnight process, that it takes time. And that's one thing I've developed an appreciation for over the years too, is that things that innately just kind of came naturally to me growing up, I realized there are more of a challenge for Drayson. But once he learns it, he's still learning it. It's just in a different fashion.
Absolutely.
He's still intaking and doing it. It's just taking him a little bit longer. But I've never stopped ever since I could see the potential in those little milestone moments, right? Because then I'm like, oh my gosh, he sat for 5 minutes, like woohoo, like it's
Yeah.
Even down to like putting clothes on, like it was a big deal when he could finally put his own clothes on.
Absolutely.
And so I think that you bring up some really valid points here. We're going to delve more into this conversation with Dr. Nikki, but we're going to save it for the next episode. So be sure to tune in next week because we're going to continue this conversation with Dr. Nikki. This concludes our episode for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have questions, comments, or even a show topic that you would like to hear about, please feel free to send me an email at info@piecesformypuzzle.com. Don't forget to like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you haven't done so already, or feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you like what you're hearing, please spread the word to others so that we can help our community grow and provide hope and inspiration. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, keep working on your puzzle, and remember, you don't have to have it all solved in a day. Take care.